guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with one that I know many of you will be excited to see. This is Age of Dogfights World War II by Forsage Games. Now, I have covered this game kind of before. There was a little preview copy that I'd had, but I've got a lot more experience with their first one, which was Age of Dogfights World War I. And they've really stepped it up here with World War II. And you can't help but expect that to happen because, of course, aviation was in its infancy in World War I. So the gameplay was a lot easier. There's a lot more streamlined. The airplanes didn't have cannons and bombs. Well, kind of bombs, but they didn't have all the stuff that the World War II planes had brought to bear. So most of that was handled by symbols and arrows, and gameplay was a lot more streamlined. So I was interested to see how Age of Dogfights World War II was going to work, because now you're introducing so many more variables to it. You've got fighters with different levels of machine guns. They have cannons. Then you've got bombers with varying levels of machine guns mounted on them, like a B-17 Flying Fortress. How are you going to have that type of gameplay in it? So I knew they were going to have to kind of rebuild the game from the ground up. It's still the same skeletal structure. So if you liked World War I, you're probably going to like World War II. But this is like just taking it to that next level, just bringing the gameplay to you. We're going to go down to the table, let you guys see the game. We're going to go over the components, and then we'll come back up here for some final thoughts. All right. Here we are down at the table, and I have just a few planes set out here just to have on the board to show you guys, and we're going to go over the components of the game and then little basics of how it is going to be played. Now, when it comes to the components, something I did find neat is they included a couple of little posters here that show off a bunch of the aircraft that are included in the game. And this isn't anything, gameplay wise. This is just neat that they included these little posters. One that shows fighters, one that shows bombers that are in the game. Now, when it comes to the rest of the components, they have a rulebook and a scenario book that come with the game. And something I definitely want to compliment the rulebook on is chock full of examples. Pictures showing what the rule is and explaining it out in detail and why it works the way that it does. They've done just such a good job with this. It helps you visualize what they are trying to convey to you. And this especially comes in handy when we start talking about some of the advanced maneuvers that the aircraft can pull off. That way you can see visually what they're trying to tell you, vertically, X, Y, Z, all the axes that these aircraft can move on. So when it comes to the rulebook, they did a very, very, very good job of designing this in such a way as to be able to make it easy for you to learn how to play the game. And it's not overly long, but it is pretty meaty. It's about 50 pages. Scenario booklet is roughly the same size. To go with that, we've got a couple of player aids of a fairly good size, and this just breaks everything else down to make it easy for you guys to see how the rules are going to work. Things like aircraft movement and the dies and what effect that can have on your movement, or the inertial speed special rule, which is the one I definitely suggest using because I really like that one. Air-to-air firing, because they even have that broke down for different forms of attack, whether you're directly behind the person, whether you're angled, whether you're head on, all the other different modifiers that can apply if you've got the speed difference, which is a special rule that will go with that inertial. Again, I recommend these two rules. And this is front and back. You see it's got all the charts, all the little modifiers that you would need in a war game, all listed down. And you got a couple of these so each player can have their own. All right, so besides those, we do have 3 mounted maps. They are front and back. One side is green for, being over land. The other side is blue for if you're doing like a naval mission. So just depending on which way you want to do it. And you can line these up in a couple of different ways. I've got just a couple of them laid out here. You can see the split running right down here, and they're nice and sturdy. And the way they're designed up to the edge, you can butt them up together to make the board, whatever direction you want. Besides these, they also have some little extensions that you can put on for if an aircraft goes off board. So like it's flying and it's making a turn and it's just going off board for a couple of spots. They do have a couple of player aids that you can put down next to the board so you can plot out where it is as it comes back onto the board. So you don't just lose the aircraft if you can't make a maneuver exactly right according to the edge of the map. We also have a buttload of dice. They're nice, meaty, weighty dice that this company has used before. Mine were pre-stickered, which I love. Oh, thank you so much. We'll get into these dice here in a minute because they are different. They have specific rules involved with all these different dice, with the exception of the two regular 2d6. These regular 2d6. The rest of them are special die that we'll get into here in just a minute. Now, when it comes to the rest of the components, understand that I'm going to show you some examples, but there's a lot more than what I'm showing you right now. So there's a buttload of like flight stands and unit cards and airplane counter, all that stuff. There's a buttload of those pieces. I just can't pull them all out onto the board. So when it comes to our aircraft, we will have a few boxes. One's British, one is American, one is German, and then there are some expansions depending on what expansions you want to get that hold all the aircraft. So you have a handful of these boxes full of all different types of aircraft. We have a bunch of these in varying colors. These are basically like damage markers. So if you take damage to your wing or your tail or your engine, you will put a different color marker on top of your aircraft. And they're designed in such a way that they can punch out and fold out and be put directly across the top of the aircraft. That way you can easily tell by looking at it what damage it has, or if you don't want to keep it on the aircraft, you can keep it on its little player unit card down over to the side. We'll go over these here in just a second. There are a bunch of different bomb markers and player unit markers, things for marking your aircraft if you're starting to perform your maneuvers. Keeping track of how many bombs, what type of bombs, and all that good stuff. The only thing that I will ding them for when it comes to these counters is that they are a little thin. They're more cardstock thickness than like counter thickness. And I think that was done for like a cost saving and a weight saving measurement because the box is rather heavy. Small ding on the game, but it's not going to really detract too much for the game, but just so you know, they are just a little touch thin. There are hundreds of these different altitude markers at varying levels, and they will all have a mark on them. So this is level 3 or level 9, level 8, right? Just different levels. It goes all the way down from 1 to 13, and you're going to have roughly about 8 or 9, just depending. You can kind of set them up in your own fashion. They do recommend doing levels 6, 7, and 8, having more of those, because you're going to have more aircraft at that level than you are at like level 13. Not many aircraft can actually get up to that ceiling anyway. But like I said, there are just hundreds of these different altitude stands. Now, for each different unit in the game, you're going to have a card associated with it that's going to give all the information that is associated with that different aircraft. Some of this information is also on the counter itself. This one, for example, is for our B-17 Flying Fortress, and you can have up to 3 of them. That's what these numbers down here are for. These little circles are for putting bomb tokens to signify how many bombs that they are carrying. See here, they can carry up to 700 pounds. And then each aircraft is going to have a list of its different stats. Now, you might have 2 different stats listed because sometimes the stats will change when the aircraft is loaded. But for example, up here, we've got our speed. It shows what dice are associated with that. Its agility, whether it's 1, 2, 3, and the little dots that are right next to it have to do with its agility as well. Its ceiling and how fast it can climb or dive. Its endurance and its durability. Endurance has to do with if you include the fuel usage rule. That's it. That is an optional rule. So basically they can run out of fuel. You can give certain aircraft drop tanks, things like that. Durability obviously is how tough it is, how much damage it can take. And then over here to the right, we see its firing capabilities. This being a B-17, it's got guns everywhere. And if you notice, there are 3 sets of numbers in each direction. So this aircraft can fire in all 6 cardinal directions around it. But those numbers, the fact that there's 3 of them, have to do whether it's firing above, equal to its level, or below. Some aircraft won't have guns below or above, and it might be blank, or you see some stats are different because it can bring more guns to bear in a certain direction versus others. Also, the little arrows right there dictate something as well, whether or not it's a fixed or a flexible gun. So we see here this B-17, that little dashed line there with the arrow means that it's flexible. Whereas if we look at our P-51 Mustang here, you see it has a straight line basic arrow, so it's a fixed firing angle. It can only fire forward. You'll also notice when we're looking at our P-51 here, it's got these stats listed down next to it that we do not have on something like a bomber. That is for tracking ammunition and for tracking its speed boost. So basically you can use so many speed boosts during a match, and that'll allow you to get a little boost to your speed. You're jamming it full throttle. When it comes to its ammo usage, you will take this down each time that you use it. Some you do get to bring it back. So after it gets to the bottom, you'll bring it back up and take it down again. Some, the firepower goes down to signify that it reduces its firepower because it runs out of cannon ammunition. Like we see here with this BF-109, first couple of times it's got a firepower of 7, but after that it starts dropping down to a 3 because it's burned up all of its 20 mil and it's now just down to its machine guns. Excuse me, 30 mil, not 20 mil. And again, these numbers on the side signify with each aircraft. So we see here, we have the P-51 and it's got a 1. So that's how you can keep track of which aircraft is which. And again, you see the stats are located on our token as well. It's got its durability, its agility, its descent, its ascent, whether or not it's acrobatic, which is that little squirrely symbol there. And then we have our firepower value there in the front. And you see, again, all of this is also shown on our B-17 as well. Now I'm giving you a rough, high view of it. There are a few more specific special rules that come into play with some of this stuff, like its durability and firepower, but that's the basic gist of how that works with all their different stats. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, the basic gist is you're going to go back and forth, moving your aircraft up to their speed value, which is going to be adjusted by these dice, and whether or not they're climbing or descending. All right, so there's something neat that comes into play when it comes to moving our aircraft. We have our movement dice, and there's a selection of blue dice and one green one, that's your boost, or we have this little squirrely purple one over here. And that's the 2 different types of movement that you can have in this game. You have just like a standard basic movement, which is where you've got your basic speed, you roll your die, and that's your movement. Or you can have inertia, which kind of carries on. You can build up speed, you can keep your speed up, or you lose speed if you're climbing, things like that. This is a little more realistic. This has more of an arcade feel to it. So just as an example, we see for our speed for our P-51 here is 12, but then it's got the little die symbol there. So you're going to roll one of those 2 die. If you do a green boost, you'll roll the green die. If not, it rolls the M1 die. Well, that's one of the blue dice, and the M1 die has different stats on it, and same with all the others. This will affect your speed round to round. So you roll it and like, oh, it's -6. So you subtract 6 and that's your movement for this turn. Now, of course, there are modifiers for that when it comes to their climbing. If they're just doing straight movement, they get +1. If they're climbing, you're going to reduce 1 for each level that they climb. If they're descending, you're going to add 1 for each level that they ascend. Sometimes damage can reduce the amount of speed that they have, but that's your basic movement, right? So if our P-51 here has 6 points of movement, it can move straight ahead 6 dots across the board, or it can do a 60-degree turn and move as well. Now, I know some of you are going, oh, well, they can't, just turn anytime they want. And you are correct. They can't. Depending on their speed will limit their turn radius. And again, how agile the aircraft is. The more agile it is, the more turns it's going to be able to perform during its maneuver. So if its final speed is equal to or under 9, it can have no limits. If it's 10 to 16, then it has to have at least one straight in between each one of its turns. If it's flying down the skies at 17 or above, it's got to have at least 2 spaces of straight movement before each turn that it does. Now, there are some rules that will get you some extra turning. Those little dots have to do with its agility as well. And if we pay attention to our dice, you see that they have dots on them. If the amount of dots on the die is equal to or greater than the dots that are on the aircraft itself, then it either gets an extra turn or an extra climb. Basically, it gets to be a little more maneuverable during that turn of movement. Now, again, I'm trying not to be overly long-winded with it, but yes, there is extra stuff with this as well. There's steep turns, there's steep dives, there's vertical dives, just like you would see like a Stuka doing a dive bomb, right? Turning straight down, and you even pull off your aircraft and you're gonna put it on the board just like that to signify that it's doing a straight down maneuver. So there are rules for all of those different types of movement onto the board. Some are basic rules and some are optional rules that you can include or not include, just up to your discretion. Now, what is it that we want to do with an aerial combat game? Well, we want to get into aerial combat. We want to have our guys shooting at each other. And to do that, you are going to have to get behind your target and be pointing with them. Depending on if you, and let's just assume these guys are at the same level. They're not, they're level 7, level 9, but let's say they're at the same level for our example purposes. They have rules in the game for all the different types of angles that you can be at. So directly behind the person, right straight behind them is your most basic shot. And for that, you're going to be here on the A column. You're going to hit them on everything but a 1, barring any other modifiers that come into play. If you are angled, so let's say, our P-51 is here, it's flying this way, and the Messerschmitt's coming in behind it like this, and it's got an angle shot on it, then we use our B column. And if they are pointed straight at each other, like so, then that is going to be the C column. Some shots are harder to make than others. And depending on whether or not one is climbing, descending, if they're angled against each other, whether or not they're banked for a turn, if they are one distance apart, you can't shoot more than one distance apart. So you're either going to be right next to the person or one space distant from them. Will determine on whether or not you can make the shot and any modifiers that are going to apply. So think of it for everything that you're out of lockstep with them. So if they're banked and you're not, that's going to be a -1. Or if they're elevating and you're not, that's going to be a -1. Too many of those will make it to where you can't shoot at them. So if you're angled down descending and they're angled up trying to climb, then you're not going to be able to shoot them, obviously, since you're not pointed at them. But yes, you can have situations where someone is below you and let's just say they're diving and we're diving. So like that, you see how they're, going down and he's pointing at his 6. Yes, that would just be a straight on shot. Now that's just going to be a single D6 roll with whatever modifiers apply to determine on whether or not that you hit your target. Hitting your target is only step 1. Then you go into your firing outcome. So did you damage them? Were they unaffected? Did they get damaged? Did they get double damage? Double damage is basically destroyed unless it's a bomber. Bombers can take up to 3 damage, and then destroyed for a 13 plus. This is where your firepower comes into play. And the basic formula, barring any other modifiers, is going to be a 2d6 roll, right? Regular 2d6 roll, plus the attacker's firepower, minus the defender's durability. Yes, there are other modifiers that come into play, but that's your basic gist. So our P51 here with a 7, you would add 6 and then subtract 3 from it. So a firepower of 10, let's just say that's what it was, would be damaged. If the Messerschmitt got that result, it would be damaged, and then you would roll your special little damage die here that'll tell you whether or not it took a tail hit, a wing hit, if it got an engine hit, if it got a weapon hit, or if it's going to be a roll again, which is, come on, pop up for me. A roll again. The only ones who get to take advantage of that one are ace pilots who get to decide where that damage goes instead. Now that's the basics of combat, but it gets so much more in depth. You can have scenarios where you have ships on the board, and these are the little thin plastic pieces that represent ships. They would be placed like such. Or you can have scenarios, let me grab this one, come on, pop out for me, where you have maybe a tank as a target on the board. Or you can have a scenario where you have AA. So this zone signifies AA fire. So if your aircraft goes flying through there, it can be shot at from the ground, but also aircraft that have bombs or want to do a strafing attack can do so in some scenarios. Now that's the quick down and dirty basics of it. But if you remember, before I knock these aircraft down, I said that there's a more advanced version of it, a version with the rules that has inertia and speed modifiers that come into play with our aircraft. And yes, there is. And that needs a different set of tokens, and you get to drop all of these dice, all these little blue dice go bye-bye, and instead you use the purple dice. And I really like this system. So how does this work? Well, that has to do with this part of the player aid, and it's your inertial speed calculation. Basically, you can choose to adjust your speed. So up to +2, down to -3, up to whatever their speed is, right? So you're basically getting to control the throttle. Remember, for our P51, its speed is 12. And let me find the marker for it. So let's say it moved on the previous turn and it was going at a speed of 12. There are little markers that you would put down, and it keeps track of what speed it was going. So on its next turn, you can choose to either increase that up to its maximum value, whatever it is. Yes, you can still use the boost if you want to get a quick burst of speed, or you can drop your speed down. So let's say the P51 wants to slow down a little bit. He wants to drop it back down to a 9. So he would have 9 movement points to use this turn. Again, there's some modifiers that will adjust that, whether he's climbing, turning, banking, diving, all that good stuff. But that's where this purple die comes into, because yes, you will still roll a die when you are moving your aircraft, and it has the little dots on it that will give you extra agility and the like. But this purple die has a lot less swing to it. It has 1 + 1, 1 - 1, and the rest are zeros and the little dots on there. So it's less swingy. It gives you a little more control over your aircraft. But on top of that, when you are trying to attack your opponent now, you can use the speed differential. So this is where you actually start taking into play some of those boom and zoomer aircraft that are going to come screaming in quick, get a shot off, and then peel off and climb back up to try to turn that back into that speed back into elevation that they can use later to dive back down on the enemy. But depending on your speed, it can change the modifiers that you're going to have when you're rolling to hit your target. Because if you're going really fast and your target's going really slow, that's going to give you a big negative modifier to your hit. And if you're going way too fast, then you're going to be going too fast to even fire at them. And they even have a little chart here for guys that are going head on against each other. But for each aircraft that you'd have on the board, you would have one extra marker that you would put down signifying what speed it's going. That way you could keep track of it. And then it has this little chart here that you can use to keep track when you're modifying it to figure out exactly what your final speed is going to be and how many movement steps you're going to get across the board. Now, I haven't even touched on everything. There's so many more things going on with this game. Like I said, there's ships, there's torpedo bombers where you're going to drop torpedoes. They're going to come sailing in towards the ship. The AA, the tanks, the dive strafing, dive bombing, trying to take out bombers. Bombers getting to passively fire back because yes, that can happen. So if the Messerschmitt, climbs up and attacks our B-17, the B-17 does get to shoot back at him, as long as he's got an angle of fire on him. So many different more things going on with it, all the little special rules, special scenarios that you can have in this game. Pretty much anything that you could think to describe when it comes to aerial combat in World War II, there's a way to simulate it down in this game. And like I said, when it comes to the rules themselves, you can really decide how basic or advanced that you want it to be. So much of it is allowed to be optional rules. So if you want to have a slower basic learning game where you're using the regular die, not worrying about keeping track of all the aircraft speed, you can do that. But once you've got a good handle of the game, you bring the extra stuff in, bring the purple in, start calculating for their speed just to see if you've got the angle and the shot and you're not going too fast in on your, it's so much good stuff going on with this. And I'll probably mention this in my final review thoughts for the game, but the only real thing that I could ding it on when it comes to the gameplay is that, yes, it will get a little cumbersome when you are switching out all your different altitude stands. Because like I said, there's like 100 of these different things for all the different altitudes. And of course, you want to take advantage of the fact that the game does have that Z axis, right? Going up, climbing, diving, all that good stuff. It really does bring the game to that next level. But yes, it is going to get a little cumbersome when you have to keep grabbing a new flight stand here, new flight stand there. And if you've got, 5, 6, 7, 8 aircraft on the board, and then your opponent does, and then you're like, it can slow it down a little bit. That's just part of the gameplay. I think with a game of this size, with the depth of the gameplay, there has to be a drawback to it. And the drawback is going to be, you got to keep track of all the little altitude stands. Small price to pay for a game of this depth, I would say. But that at least gives you a bird's eye view of how the game plays. If you want to see the game in action, I do have an example game of Age of Dogfights World War I that you can go see played out. That's over a series of videos. This is like that, except like I said, taken to that next level where you've got actual firepower values. You've got much faster aircraft. You have bombs, you have torpedoes, you got ships, you got AA, you got tanks, so many different types, and up to and including jets in this as well. But all right, I will start yapping about it. Let's go back up and do some final thoughts on the game. All right, so you guys have seen most, I won't say all, most of what Age of Dogfights World War II has to offer. And I gotta say, I really like this game, and I like to support smaller publishers like this, family-run operations. The little guy trying something new. We see so many of the same old usual stuff coming from different publishers, and it's nice to see a smaller family-run publisher trying out new things and seeing what they can accomplish. And I definitely appreciate the steps that they had taken. I mentioned it when we were down there looking at it, but the fact that they had mine like pre-assembled because I hate stickers. And I don't know if they did that special for me or if they had the option to do that, but it was definitely appreciated that they took that little step, because you gotta hate putting on the damn little stickers on the game. But that's a small issue. It's not really something to worry about, but I do appreciate them taking that step. But when it comes to the game itself, I gotta say, I like it. I think the components are good, and you can tell this isn't a standard coming out of China published game. It doesn't have that produced feel like what's the best way to, it has not a homemade feel to it, but like a home loved feel to it, right? And it is different in that aspect. And there's some parts of the components that are really good. The mounting boards are really, really good. Player aids, they've definitely done well with. The planes themselves, having the amount of information that is on the plane pieces, the plane counters, I'll call them, and being able to see most everything that you need to understand for the plane whether it's acrobatic or what level weapons it had and all that on the counters themselves is definitely nice. The stands themselves, the altitude stands, that does get a little cumbersome because there are a lot of stands. And of course, with this game having a higher ceiling to it, because the planes could go higher, you have so many more stands now to worry about than you did before. And I can see that wearing on people a little bit as your planes go up and down. And honestly, there's really just not much you can do to it. This is a 3D game. It's not just the X and the Y axis. You've got the Z axis that you have to worry about. And I like that simulated level of gameplay. And the only way to do that is to have this extra cumbersome step involved with it when it comes to, having to change out all the different stands. Yeah, it's irritating a little bit. I got to change it again. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. Usually when you get stuck in a dogfight, your pieces are going at it, you're only going to be within a few levels anyway. You're not going to have too many pieces that you're, going all these different levels. So you'll have a handful of levels that you'll have to worry about. You can have those stands nearby to grab. So it kind of streamlines the process a little bit, and it's not as bulky as it could be. As for the rest of the pieces, I really like the dice. I've always liked their dice. Just whoever is making their dice, I just like them. They feel good. They've got the nice little rounded edges to them. They roll well for being, six-sided. And they just have a nice, meaty, weighty feel in your hand. It doesn't feel like light little plastic cheapy dice. They actually have nice dice for it. And mine had stickers already put on, so I didn't have to worry about that, which again, is always appreciated. When it comes to the trackers, right, we've got the red and the green, tracking your ammo levels, your speed or your boost or all those different things. Or if you're playing in the different type, right? So if you're doing the controlling your speed aspect, you've got those markers and those are nice plastic pieces. Don't worry about them having to break or the stickers coming off or anything like that. The only ones that I think people might have an issue with are those thinner plastic film pieces. And I get it. It really comes down to, what they could do. And I think that's like a production cost type deal, cost cutting measure, those thin transparent plastic pieces to represent things like ships or target areas or your AA areas. And I could see people maybe having issues where those get bent because they are kind of thin, but it is made of that plastic that if it bends, it kind of sticks in whatever direction that you bend it. I think that really comes down to just take care of your stuff, make sure you store them properly, and you shouldn't have too big of an issue with it. I understand they don't bother me, but it might bother some people. And the only other thing when it comes to the components themselves are the actual counters themselves that represent things like your bombs or tokens, keeping track of your turns or your playing there on the board. Those counters are rather thin. But again, I think that's a cost saving measure that they took. And I understand that because again, it's a smaller publisher. They're not doing 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 print runs, right, at a major manufacturer. They're doing smaller print runs, hand putting a lot of the stuff together. So they have to make cuts where they can. And I can understand, trimming down the counter size to save that. Plus, it makes the box lighter a little bit. And that's going to save them a little bit on shipping costs again. And they're shipping all over the world. So I can understand that. And it's another thing. Is just be careful with the counters and you should be fine. The key thing for the game is the gameplay itself. And I think they've excelled. I think they've done a really good job when it comes to the gameplay. Like I said, I was a little worried at first, like how are they going to translate that formula that they created for World War I into World War II now with all the different things that are being added to it. And they even got, jets added into it, different speed levels, cannons, machine guns, and bombers with machine guns and turrets and everything just bristling all over it. And they did a really good job. And I like the fact that they have a lot of the rules put down as optional, right? So you could start with a more basic version of the game, especially if you're first learning it. You don't have to worry about some of the extra stuff. And then you can start adding that into it later. Things like, bombing runs and dive bombing and all that stuff. But it's all there for you if you want to get that deep with it. Like, especially when it came down to the rules. When I was first looking at this, I expected the rules for movement to be a couple of pages, but the rules for movement are actually quite in depth. And that again goes back to that optional rule phase. And they have all the different types of aerial maneuvers that you would expect, right? You know, the split S's and loops and wing over and rolling over the cockpit and all that type of stuff. These aerial maneuvers that you would expect out of some, not all, you know, the aircraft that have the ability to be acrobatic, or things like Stukas that are dive bombers, right? They have the ability to roll over and dive, and they figured out a way to simulate that in game where it's accurate and it's thematic to the gameplay. Because again, that was something that I was kind of curious about. Like, how are they going to translate this? It's not World War One where you got slow planes puttering around and they're not being overly acrobatic, and now you've got, you know, Stuka dive bombers or planes that are coming in and dropping torpedoes. I mean, they even got rules for the torpedoes streaming in on the enemy ships. They really did try to think of all the different maneuvers of the aircraft and how that would translate down to the board and the little map points that they've got set out for the planes as they make these maneuvers. So in a way, this game reminds me of X-Wing, the miniatures game that sadly got canceled, which should have. I mean, how do you mess up Star Wars? Neither here nor there, but good God, those people crazy. Regardless, that was space aerial combat. Same thing here, aerial combat. And when you were first getting into X-Wing, it's this steep wall. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different ships, a lot of different munitions, a lot of different things going on, all the different maneuvers the ships can make. And at first it seems kind of insurmountable, like, oh, I'll never keep track of all this. And I found with this game, it has that same feeling there at the beginning, like, oh, there's so much going on with it. But as you spend more time with it, a lot of it becomes intuitive, and you can kind of see in your mind what maneuvers the ships are going to, not ships, the planes are going to make on the board, just like I could when I was playing X-Wing, when I would picture out, hey, how are my ships going to move across the map? Same thing here when it comes to the planes. After you get a few games under your belt, all of that will start to feel much more intuitive. It is going to feel kind of heavy at the beginning, but once you've gotten into it, it really does start to flow. And they've done a good job with the rules. And again, especially with the maneuvers and that realistic inertia when it comes to the planes, which that I definitely recommend is the way to go. To give you more control and make it more thematic, especially when you're trying to scream in, because some of the planes, you know, burn and turners, they're supposed to scream in on their target and then peel away. Playing that way, you can have that type of dogfight happening in this game. Now, I've played other games when it comes to aerial dogfights, you know, Blood Red Skies and the little Tolkien one, the naval one that I backed, Fighters Over Europe, I think is the name of it. Fighters Over the Pacific was the first one. They all try to simulate aerial combat in their own way. And I gotta say, out of all that I've played, I think Age of Dogfights World War II does the best job of accurately simulating that feeling of a dogfight down to a board. With that, you're going to have a lot of rules. It's going to be a little bit steeper to learn at the beginning, but it's going to give you a much more accurate gameplay at the end of it. So yeah, if you're someone who likes Blood Red Skies, if you're someone who likes, you know, any of the aerial dogfight games, and you want to get something that's got some meat on the bones, Age of Dogfights World War II is one that's definitely worth getting. It's not a hard game, but there's a lot going on with it, so it's going to take you a little bit to get used to all the rules. But once you do, you really will find something that you'll enjoy here. So yes, ultimately, Age of Dogfights will get a recommend for me, and I'm going to give them a pre-sticker die out of 10. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.